Inside Story on BFM 89.9.
Good evening. This is Inside Story with Lee Chui Lin and Shamla Ganesan. Tonight, fresh graduates are struggling in the job market. We're checking in with them to hear more.
First up, what is it like being a graduate looking for a job during the pandemic? And then, how has the last year changed hiring culture? Finally, tips on staying sane when the job hunts get tough.
So what challenges have you faced when looking for a job, and how did you overcome it? We want to know. Call us 7733-2900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio. This is Inside Story. It is coming up to 6:08, and we've been talking a lot about the issues that fresh graduates have been facing, and that and the unemployment issues as a whole that exist within our job market at the moment. But now we have new numbers to back it up. So, according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, the rate of unemployed graduates rose 22.5% in 2020, and that this unemployment affected both degree and diploma holders. And if you're wondering how many people that actually encompasses, it would be 22% out of over 5 million people.
So this actually encompasses several categories of people. More than 2/3 of these graduates were actually in the skilled occupation category. And there's been an increase in employed graduates in the semi-skilled category. Whereas just about 2.2% of those were from the low-skilled employment category. So really, we're seeing these sorts of changes happening across these different levels of education and skill sets. But largely, I think we can guess why this is happening. According to the Department of Statistics Chief Statistician Datuk Sri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin, he said that this high number was due to the difficult economic environment as well as the overall labour market situation, and that this has resulted in fewer job openings as well as increased competition. Really not something any new graduate wants to hear. And the pandemic has, of course, been at the background of all of this. So it's also impacting I think choices that companies might make, risks that they're willing to take. A lot of companies are downsizing. I don't know that there has been this sort of perfect storm of factors affecting somebody who's just out looking for a job.
No, and I was just thinking about it it's been a while since I was a fresh grad and looking for a job and in that situation. But I think that for many of us, we think that there is a set path towards adulthood in the same way that we expect to buy a house, all these milestones, right? Buy a house, buy a car, all these things. And part of that is graduating and then getting a job. This is what we're told is next. This is what we're told, if we study hard, if we work hard, we'll graduate well, and then we'll go onwards into, I'm not saying that a job is owed, but the expectation is that this is what's next. And I think to have something like the pandemic stymie that in such a big way, because at this point, I want to be clear that I know we've talked a lot about the quality of education. Whenever we do these stories, we also get messages about the quality of fresh grads, the mismatch between qualifications and the job opportunities that are available. And I don't want to downplay that. I'm sure that all of that is also a factor in this. But I think now it's also worth highlighting the fact that it might not really be anything that graduates themselves are doing. It may really just be the market in which they are entering, the kinds of jobs that are available, the headspace in which companies themselves are in terms of looking for new people.
So if you look at statistics from the Ministry of Human Resources, so on paper, they do show that there's been an increase of jobs. So essentially from 97,000 in November last year, it's increased to 162,000 in December. But most of those vacancies are for blue-collar jobs like factories and construction and security. And so if you look back at the skilled category that we were talking about earlier, that seems to be where the struggle really is. And if you look at information that we get out of the Ministry of Higher Education, so they said that as of October last year, 300,000 fresh graduates came out in 2019. Only about 40,000 have found jobs. And they also said that about 75,000 out of those 300,000 are expected to struggle in finding jobs. Those are actually huge numbers that we're talking about. And let's not forget that the fallout from this pandemic is going to take a while to resolve.
And in trying to address this in this moment, right, what we're seeing are, of course, part-time jobs, people taking up gig income, whether it is working as delivery riders, what have you. But that is not the same thing as pursuing a career, unless that's something that you actually wanted to do, right? Instead, it's something that circumstance has forced people into. And the response that's coming out from, for example, the Ministry of Higher Education is that let's upskill, offering options to upskill. And upskilling is important, but when we're talking about the gap existing in terms of the kinds of jobs that are available to begin with, and knowing that the vacancies at the moment are for blue-collar jobs, for instance, I'm not sure what upskilling really does except make things better for you in the long run, which is important. But what about right now when you're looking for a job to support yourself and your family?
But even with the long run, right, when you're a fresh grad in a market that you cannot predict and you don't know what the next 10 years are going to look like, what do you even upskill to? What do you learn that you think might be helpful? It's not at all easy to predict these things. It's fine to say learn coding, but will that code be useful 10 years from now? Are people looking to hire if you graduated with a hotel management degree? Is coding the upskilling you should be doing?
So for what it's worth, the Malaysian Employers Federation has said that employers can absorb close to 50% of fresh grads in the job market should the government continue to support companies, which includes wage subsidies, tax benefits, and other incentives. And again, that's sort of a waiting game, isn't it? Or it's seeing what happens. But this exact moment, if I am a fresh graduate who has been looking for a job now for, say, a year and a half, considering the length of this pandemic, I don't know. This would not be enough for me. I would need a more immediate solution, or at least something to address the issue. So we're talking today essentially about how tough the job market during the pandemic is for fresh graduates. We're seeing an increasing number take on jobs just to make ends meet, even if they're not dream jobs in their dream career. So we're going to, after this, hear from a graduate who's been looking for a job to find out exactly how things are. We would like to know, though, what challenges have you faced when looking for a job and how did you overcome it? You can call us 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio.
Bodacious, fabulous minds. BFM 89.9, the business station.
It is 6:16 and you're listening to Inside Story with Lynn and Sharmila. We're talking today about the struggles that fresh graduates have been facing in the job market, struggles which are even now being highlighted by the Department of Statistics. So we are just about to hear what the experience has actually been like on the ground. But we want to know from you in general, pandemic or no pandemic, what challenges have you faced when looking for a job and how did you overcome it? Call us 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio. And we are now crossing over to Amirul Zain, who is a fresh graduate with a bachelor's degree in digital film production. Amirul, thanks for speaking with us.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us about yourself. We mentioned the digital film production as your degree. Why did you choose that?
Well, I think as a kid, I've always been passionate in entertainment in general. I was that kid that would be so obsessed with film and TV and music and theater. It was, for I think most of my growing up, it was the only thing that kept me going. And I want to create work that can help other kids like me growing up as well. I think that's where my passion came from.
And what are you hoping to do in your career? What kind of job are you looking for?
Of course, the dream of every film graduate is to be a successful, award-winning, famous filmmaker, I guess. But honestly, at this point, I just want to earn a living being creative, being able to use my creative muscles every day, because as an artist, what else is there for us to live for, you know?
So, what has looking for a job been like? What have you been trying to do?
Well, I think, because see, it's hard for us in the entertainment industry during this MCO, because especially as a filmmaker, a lot of our work is very collaborative, right? Like we need to go out and see and talk to people and interact with people, but we can't. And for a lot of us in the industry, it's more than just a job. It's freelance work. As long as we don't get a job, we don't get paid, right? And I would say that I'm lucky enough that I consider myself a pretty good writer. So looking for a job, because I would say film is where my field is, half of my options are already gone. And it's not really my fault or anyone's fault. It's simply because we can't leave our houses. So mostly it's been, I would say, writing or copywriting related jobs that I've been trying to, I guess, look for recently, which isn't easy. Copywriting is not an easy field to get a foot in. It very much depends on who you know and why you know this person. So yeah, that's my struggle, I think.
Have you been, do you find that at this point in time, people are less willing to take a risk with a fresh graduate, someone who has yet to build a portfolio?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think because fresh graduates, it is already accepted that we don't earn much already to begin with. But with the risk of all these companies going under due to the pandemic, it's always the newbies that are always the first out to leave. So unless you can prove to these companies that I can make a difference to your company, that it's in your best interest to hire me, they won't have a good enough reason to take that risk. And to prove that I am worth the risk, how do you prove that? How do you prove to a company that I am worth your time, I am worth your energy and your money? It's not something that I can just write down on paper,
So what have you been hearing from the companies or the people you've been speaking with?
It's always the same thing, right? So the ad will come out as, looking for fresh graduates, encouraged to apply, no experience needed. And then you interview with them and it goes great, charisma and charm and confidence up to the nines. And then 2 weeks later, you don't hear from them. So then when you ask them, they're like, actually, we are looking for people with more experience, actually. I hope you understand. And I'm like, I guess I understand, Yeah.
And how have you been feeling about this, really, particularly with the pandemic, particularly with the MCOs going on?
See, I think my final year as a student got taken away from me, right? And it's always you ask any university student, my final year is going to be the year where I build my portfolio, where I start getting experience and all that. My entire final year was taken away from me. The last memory that I have of school was 2019, and I feel like all of the things that I planned to do in order to build not only my portfolio, but to build a presence of myself within the industry, even if it's just at a small degree, I don't have that. And it's lots of feelings of insecurity and inadequacy, and there's lots of imposter syndrome happening. Is it my fault? Like, is it me? Am I the reason why I am struggling? Because I can't just keep going around blaming society, blaming the pandemic. It's not realistic to blame that. So I think when it comes to mental health and what we are feeling on our end, it's always the question of, if there was no pandemic, would I be doing okay now? If there was no MCO, would I be having a good paid, stable job? Which is such a messed up thing to think, because you have absolutely no control over it at all.
Are your friends having similar experiences?
Well, my peers and my classmates definitely are. I think for a lot of us, I think in general, we try to freelance as much as we can until we can get something secured. And it's usually, I guess, widely accepted that you freelance for a few years, or and then you go to something permanent, or you do something permanent first and then you freelance, right? And for now, I think the only choice we have is to either freelance or intern. And for a lot of us, I would say we are overqualified to intern at a certain point, and freelancing is not stable. So I think most of me and my peers, we are just trying to get by without going crazy. I think I would say that some of my peers are definitely doing better than others. But in general, it's not easy to feel hopeful that your goals and your dreams can be achieved when so many things are not within your control.
So at the moment, what would you say are your biggest concerns in terms of your work and your career?
I would say my main worry regarding a possible career in the entertainment industry is whether or not there is a career to look forward to. I think I am an art student, and as we all know, in Malaysia, in the world, art is not really a field that people see as, for lack of a better word, essential, right? There's, like it's widely accepted. There are more important things that need to be filled. There are more important roles that need to be filled. But without art, there is nothing for us to live for. Like we can have long lives, we can have good health care, but without art, what is having a long life, for, right? So I think it's just, will there actually be careers out there for people like me? Will there be jobs available out there for people like me? Or would I have to resort to creating my own jobs? Why is it that I have to create my own job for myself when, 10 years ago, people who are older than me didn't need to do that. They have places to apply to. So yeah, it's I don't know if I have an actual answer for your question. It's just, do I even have a career? Is there even any job opportunities available? Will there be job opportunities available?
So, Amirul, you've spoken a lot about the importance of creativity, right? And how you want that to be a part of what you do and your career moving forward. But thinking about it, has this past year changed your plans for what you might want to do in terms of your career? I mean, have you thought about making a change?
Well, I mean, you see, I genuinely believe that what I want to do, my ambitions are important. I genuinely believe that, right? Like you just look at 2020, all over the world, people are stuck at home. They can't leave their houses. They can't do things that they previously enjoyed to do. So what do they do with that free time, or with that inverted commas free time? They turn to art. They turn to movies and TV shows. They turn to music and painting and sculpting and drawing. And they turn, because these are things that we do to help fill our souls. Like we say that, the entertainment industry isn't important. What do these artists do? Like what do they actually contribute to the world? But in a time where the world needed them the most, the world turned to art. The world turned to artists to help them forget for a short while that everything is chaotic, everything seems hopeless. So I genuinely think that what I do, what I want to do, is important. But in the meantime, I guess right now at least, I'm trying to research ways to monetize maybe my own work of art. I'm trying to find ways to collaborate with other artists using Zoom as an online platform. I am trying to maybe work on my own projects to build up a portfolio. But I guess it's also a part of me that I do not want to admit, that I eventually have to just dumb down my ego and maybe do an odd job, work as a delivery person, for example, or be HR, or do like admin office work. at the end of the day, I need to learn to let down my ego, because I do feel like I genuinely don't have a choice at this point.
What words of advice would you have for your fellow job seekers who might be feeling pretty similar right now?
Oh, words of advice. Let me see. I would say that when you are feeling so lost and confused, I guess it is okay to take time for yourself and do things that you enjoy doing. You know, it's okay to pick up a paintbrush or sit back, make some popcorn, watch a movie. You know, it's okay to take time for yourself. You know, it's okay to feel upset and feel insecure and feel angry at the world, but don't let it ruin that spirit that you have, because we all have a spirit in us. And I think for a lot of us, that spirit is breaking. So take time, you know, breathe, watch a movie, listen to music, dance in your room. Because honestly, when times are really tough, that's the best possible thing you can do.
Amirul, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, you guys. I really had fun.
It was lovely speaking with you, and good luck on the job hunt. That was Amirul Zain, who is a fresh graduate with a bachelor's degree in digital film production, talking to us about what it's like putting yourself out there in a tough hiring environment at the moment. We want to know, what are your thoughts on this, and what challenges have you faced when looking for a job? How did you overcome it? You can let us know. You can call us 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio.
Bringing fresh meaning.
It is 6:38 and you're listening to Inside Story with Lynn and Sharmila. We're talking tonight about fresh graduates struggling in a pandemic job market. I wanted to say post-pandemic, but the truth is it's still a pandemic job market, and the struggles will likely continue into the post-pandemic stage anyway. So we wanted to look at the situation more closely. We heard earlier from Amirul Zain, who is a fresh grad struggling with finding permanent employment at the moment. And we are just about to talk about how the pandemic has changed the way we think about hiring. Before that, though, we wanted to know, what challenges have you faced when looking for a job, and how did you overcome it? You can call us 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, tweet us at BFM Radio. First up, we have this message from Ling.
So Ling says, a degree holder is just a person privileged enough to have parents to pay for our degrees. What is so wrong with taking up any jobs available? Time to get off our high horse and work. In every job I've ever been on, cleaner, kitchen helper, care home assistant, and professional jobs, I've learned so many things on the spectrum of knowledge. One never loses by trying something new. Ling, you do make great points there, but I did want to say that I wouldn't assume that fresh graduates aren't willing to do these things. I know a number of people who are doing Grab delivery or working part-time, when stores were open, working part-time as cashiers in restaurants and so on. So I don't necessarily think that what we are saying is that they don't want to do these jobs, but I do think that it can be quite crushing to have spent 3 or 4 years studying something only to be made to feel like that's not going to take you anywhere.
Yes, and also I don't think everyone's parents pay for their degrees. So,
there is that.
Just to say, but I think that what comes to mind for me at least is that from the stories that we're hearing, it's not so much a reluctance, as you say, Sharmila, to take on the jobs. I think it is a concern about what that might look like in 5 to 10 years, because especially if you've made a significant investment in your degree, and some degrees are longer and more expensive than others, I think that there is this question of whether or not you are going to get so bogged down in just earning money for survival that you never get to do the thing that you want to do in your career. And so while that may be a personal loss on one hand, I think we also need to ask ourselves, do we value people who aren't doctors? I mean, do we even value our doctors enough is a question. But do we value right now people beyond what the government has so kindly deemed essential, right? Do we still think that those careers, those jobs are important? Do we want people to be able to get experience in that rather than necessarily, running around and just trying to do side jobs in order to make ends meet? So I agree with you, Ling, in terms of learning in different jobs. I think that that's such an important point. I do, however, also think I mean, people want to get their careers on track, and I can also very much empathize with that. We do have other messages, which we'll come back to later, but we do now have with us Joelle Pang, who's the General Manager of Fast Jobs Malaysia, to talk about how the pandemic is affecting the way we hire. Joelle, thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, and thanks for the invitation. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
So how has the pandemic changed hiring culture or the way we hire?
So that's a great question because the focus has always been about the future of work, and very little attention has been paid to the way or the future of hiring. So two key things that we have actually noticed. One is that we at Fast Jobs, we have received a lot of requests from our employers to start helping them and to support them in their virtual hiring experience. Because I think that we have all came to terms with the fact that face-to-face or mass hiring or in-person hiring events are going to be at least not going to be happening in the near future. So a lot of the interview process has been taken to a virtual kind of setting. So for example, like with our eFast Recruit I would say experience, it really is an online mass hiring event. And we have actually seen a lot of our clients starting to adopt and even to embrace the online hiring process. And similarly as well, I think that given the business uncertainty that's still very much in the market, employers, this is what we call the employers market, where there are a lot of people looking for jobs, especially with reputable employers. And they are, of course, now looking at still hiring. But we have also started noticing that a lot of jobs have become a management associate or management trainee jobs, no longer just those office jobs in banks and in MNCs that offer management trainee positions, but even in operational roles, we are starting to see management associates for store supervisors and retail supervisors, which is really, really interesting because I think that employers are now really looking for job seekers that bring that something extra to the table to join their organizations.
Is there a mismatch between the qualifications of fresh graduates in comparison to the positions that are available?
I wouldn't say that is so much the case. But one thing we do notice, though, is that there is a lot more pre-qualifying activities that happen even before the first interview. So I think that, we are starting to notice that employers are really looking for relevant experience. So really looking at internship experiences that have been done in the past. And also there are many more rounds of online tests and aptitude assessments that do take place before even the first interview is being conducted. And I think, just going back to the message that you were sharing earlier, I think that this is where perhaps taking on different positions in the meantime actually do help to play a part, because a common question that is being asked by interviewers as well is that, okay, given that you have just graduated, how have you been also making use of this spare time or this lull period? Like, what are some of the new skills you've learned? So try something new, even if it means starting a home business. I think that this is really that little bit that will push you to over the edge, across the board, and catch the attention of employers.
Are there specific companies or sectors that are actively hiring, or rather that we're seeing more actively hiring than others?
Mm-hmm. So great question, Lynn. I think that this is where the essential services term comes back up again, because we do see a lot of hiring that's still taking place in your convenience chain stores, supermarkets, and your pharmacies that I would say businesses that are still operating at this point in time. In fact, one of our employers, Don Donkey, they have been doing online mass hiring even during this very difficult period. And as you see, they have actually opened their first outlet, and a big part of that was because they were hiring aggressively, even in a time where businesses seem to not be able to operate. And I think that's it. There are still opportunities that happens in small pockets across different sectors, because employers are really starting to embrace the fact that many jobs will have to still take place, even if it means that they need to set up the infrastructure for a work from home arrangement. But that's it. It goes back to then, how do you stand out against the rest of your peers who are also competing for that same few jobs that's available?
One thing we're seeing is a lot more offers of contract positions as opposed to full-time employment. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this might be a shift that sticks around even after the pandemic ends?
I would say that, of course, we always like to say, okay, once the pandemic ends, life will return back to normal. But what does normal even mean anymore, right? So I actually think that, the term contract position, a lot of times people think of it as something that benefits the employer and less so of the employee. But I think that is also really a shift in perspective in that sense, because we do see the gig economy coming up in a very strong way. So gig economy may be defined as, okay, Grab drivers or food delivery riders or e-commerce rider drivers. But I feel that, or rather what we are seeing that's happening now is the gig economy is starting to expand and have a new definition of and life of its own, which is actually very beneficial for the job seeker as well. So I think that contract work or freelance work really, where I'm working, say, three days a week instead of the usual 6 days that's required for a full-time job, right? That actually is super beneficial for the job seeker as well, because think of it this way, I may be holding a full-time job, but if I'm looking to make ends meet or to support my family, I can now also look for more contract or freelance work that allows me to utilize my free time over the weekends or even in the evenings. Or let's say I'm a student or I'm a stay-home mom, or I may only be able to commit 3 days or even 2 days a week to work. That actually allows a job seeker, I would say, to return to the workforce and to then take on these jobs that may not have been available otherwise. So I think that, as we all adapt and adjust and soon embrace all this new future of work, I think that contract work might be here to stay, but it might actually be evolve into a form where it is beneficial, not just for the company that is looking to also mitigate business risk, but also for job seekers, because the whole market expands as a whole.
So I think the worry here is that traditionally, right, what you want out of a job, aside from all the usuals, is stability. This idea that you can have it for good. And I think, considering what you said earlier with the this being an employer's market and with contract work coming to the fore, might this impact the kind of benefits and care that employees get from their workplace? Will more competition, fewer permanent positions mean that companies could get away with doing less?
I think this is a great question, and I would say that in today's times where everything is on social media, sometimes I do believe that the public forms a check and balance against such activities from happening. But at the same time, I really believe that that benefits will find and incentives will find its way to take a form that impacts both the employer as well as the job seeker stakeholders, equally. Like, for example, if I'm doing freelance work or contract work, some of the benefits or incentives that I may get in place of, say, medical welfare or medical claims, for example, maybe that I may be receiving my pay once every 2 weeks instead of waiting till the end of the month. So I think that given how fluid the situation is, I believe that while, yes, definitely there may be some practices that may not benefit the employee as much, but I also am hopeful that there will be many incentives and new policies that will come up that would soon benefit and allow the gig economy to flourish. And in fact, this is we are very hopeful and see a lot of opportunities in the gig economy, which is also why I think Fast Jobs, we are really starting to explore this sector of job seekers, and really to see how we can be that bridge once again to, as you said, hopefully more best practices and more good outcomes happen with this flourishing sector, rather than what you said previously, which is that maybe employers getting away with giving less benefits and so on. So I hope that addresses your questions.
Yes, and Joelle, we really only have a minute left. What message would you like to leave fresh graduates with, those who are struggling to negotiate the job market?
Mm-hmm. So I would say keep trying, stay hopeful, and just remember that as a fresh grad, you are technology savvy, you know how to use your devices. And in fact, your smartphone nowadays is the very resource you need to get yourself acquainted and get yourself the opportunity to go for interviews. So don't worry, even if you are rejected the first few times, there are still companies that are looking for talents like you, and take this opportunity to practice your interview skills. Stay plugged in, even with Fast Jobs resources, where we are constantly giving you tips on how to ace the interview, or how do you show up strong for your first week of work. And I think it's really to keep learning, to keep a positive mindset and to get yourself involved in programs that will help you to upskill yourself. And even if you don't get the job now, don't forget to take stock of the learning experiences that you have along the journey, because that's going to prove to be very meaningful and to give you that story to tell when you go for interviews in the future. So thank you.
Joelle, thanks so much for joining us this evening. That was Joelle Pang, General Manager at Fast Jobs Malaysia. After this, we're going to be continuing the conversation and looking at the emotional impact that this can have and how to manage that on the job search. Keep it here on Inside Story, BFM 89.9.
Beyond Frivolous Matters, BFM 89.9, the business station.
It's 6:53 and you're listening to the evening edition, or rather to Inside Story with Lynn and Sharmila. And we've been focused this whole hour on the struggles that fresh grads have been facing during the pandemic, in this pandemic job market. And we wanted to close off by talking about emotions, because it really can take a toll. And I think that can also affect the way that you go into these interviews, right? And the never-ending hunt. So joining us now to talk about this, we have Hetal Doshi, organizational psychologist and CEO of Psych. Hetal, thank you so much for speaking with us.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.
So we've heard fresh grads talking about the back and forth of feeling hopeful, getting let down when they're applying. What effect can this have on them emotionally, and how might that translate to how they approach the job search?
It's just like having a first breakup. The first dose of unemployment creates really high negative ramifications and perceived barriers in never being able to find hope again. These feelings of stress, depression, anxiety, and stigmatization are very, very common. And in fact, particular research was done, and they found that not being able to get a job was as stressful of an event as divorce or marital separation. The worst emotion from this entire experience is the swinging from hope to disappointment, leaving one feeling quite helpless after a few swings. And hopelessness or helplessness is really one of the precursors of contemplations of suicide. In a particular study as well, when they looked at the cost of unemployment, they looked at the economic cost as well as the cost to happiness. They found that the cost to happiness was even larger than the cost of not having money. And although employed graduates were happier than unemployed graduates, it doesn't really affect unemployment for the first 2 months. It also suggests that those who are unemployed, it doesn't mean that when you get employed, you actually feel happier eventually. So I guess really trying to be happy in the moment is quite a valuable thing. Easier said than done, but definitely valuable.
Hetal, which leads us to this idea of expectations, right? Because many of us enter the market with a sort of dream job in mind, and it's one of those things that may really not be available right now. What advice do you have on managing expectations when looking for a job during the pandemic?
Yeah, I love those little memes nowadays with, where they compare expectations versus realities. So I think it's a very valuable thing to ask yourself, what do I really, really want in the end that I can control? So that really comes into narrowing down two things. One, typically people will feel that life is very unfair, and it removes the whole element of unfairness or unjustness. The other thing is that people tend to focus a lot on what is uncontrollable. So this question really helps to get you into a frame and space where you can control and where you can play to your own level of fairness. One of the things that becomes very good in terms of setting expectations and being able to meet it is actually having small little groups of 4, people who are probably unemployed. Doing role playing has actually been one of the most valuable things. Pretending that you are successful or unsuccessful and being able to cope with those emotions are quite valuable as well. So they call this attribution training or mental training as well. And it's best done in groups of 4 as role plays before the event even takes place.
Now, we are reading of fresh grads working side gigs, doing part-time jobs, and this is valuable. We've established this, but how might this also impact their capacity and headspace when job hunting for something more permanent?
Yeah, there's, trying to multitask is not the best thing in the world, but you can kind of make it work. In these kind of scenarios, I think first and foremost, well done if you're already hustling. That is part of being employed. The other thing would be, I guess the best thing to do would be just to make sure that you carve out time When a particular study that was done, it didn't talk about the fact that you needed a lot of time to be able to get a job. In fact, in Malaysia, the statistics were quite interesting. Within the first year itself of being unemployed, majority, or if not close to 100%, tend to end up getting their jobs. So this particular research suggests that it's not about how much time you invest in it, but the consistency and the intensity of it. So just carving out maybe 1 hour, one solid hour, being proactive in that time, doing it consistently and doing it intensely is better than sitting down for 8 hours anyway. And it is very likely that those who have less time are generally going to be a lot more impactful.
Hetal, we just have about a minute left. Considering how tough it's been, what tips would you like to offer for fresh grads looking for a job?
I think first thing, never do anything out of fear. Settle in and do it out of an opportunity and maybe even an adventure. I'd highly recommend that you watch a video by Chia Chiang on TEDx, and it's called What I Learned from 100 Days of Rejection. Make this a wonderful project and experiment in your life. And lastly, fortune really favors the bold and the consistent. So just have lots of courage and keep going really, really strong. I really do wish that you would have more than anything a good group of friends to do this with, and help you to keep into that right mood and headspace.
Hetal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Hetal Doshi, organizational psychologist, CEO of OPsych, talking to us really about how to manage emotions and expectations in a tough job hunt, which is something that we're seeing for fresh grads at the moment because of the pandemic more than anything else. So we've been asking you, what are your thoughts on this? What challenges have you faced when looking for a job, and how did you overcome it? Keep those thoughts coming. You've been listening to Inside Story, BFM 89.9.